Hello and welcome to Abbey Road Studios. This is Studio 3. Welcome to everybody watching on the live stream and to everybody here in the studio. This is a special discussion as part of the Amplify Festival. It's Abbey Road in conjunction with Scala Radio. I'm Mark Kermode from Scala Radio. We have a panel with us of great composers, and we're going to spend the next hour talking about composing for film and TV and theatre. And on our panel we have Segun Akinola. We have Isobel Waller-Bridge, and we have Amelia Warner. I want to begin by saying that we are going to have questions from the audience in the last quarter of an hour of the show. So if everyone's okay with taking questions from the audience, that's great. I think I'm right in saying that we've played every single one of your film scores on Scala Radio.
Really?
Yes, but I don't think you've recorded here at Abbey Road.
No, I haven't.
What are your feelings about the studio?
Well, I was meant to be recording something here in December, but it's actually just been pushed, and I think it's not going to be here anymore, which I was disappointed about. But no, I'd love to record here. I mean, I think, in London we're so lucky to have Air and Abbey Road, and two of the greatest spaces to record music. So we're really spoiled.
Amelia, your road into the industry came through performing rather than composing. Tell us how you became the composer that you are now. What was the career path?
Yeah, it was a slightly higgledy-piggledy road, and I was releasing music. I was kind of, writing my own music and releasing it, and I'd released a couple of EPs, and at the same time I was also...
You recorded under a different name. You recorded as
Slow Moving Millie.
Slow Moving Millie.
And then I had, and during that time I'd started scoring a couple of commercials and short films, and that was usually for people who just needed a favor or had run out of money or, just needed something and they knew I played the piano. So I kind of started doing that and really, really loved it and loved seeing music connect to picture and felt, very connected to it. And then a director wanted to license a piece of mine for a film that he was doing, and then I cheekily kind of said, well, I could do the rest of it if you want. And he said, okay. So that was, and I didn't have any experience, and that was Mum's List, and that was my first score. And then I've just, been kind of, as soon as I did it, I knew that it was what I wanted to do. But I think because I didn't go to music college, I wasn't classically trained, I didn't really know if I could, and then it was actually only from doing it that I realized you can, you don't necessarily have to have all of those things.
Ask all three of you, when you were younger, did you collect soundtrack albums? Because I did, because I'm ancient. And when I was young, there was no such thing as video. If you saw a film and you liked it, the only way you could live the film again was to, maybe read the novelization or the book and listen to the soundtrack album. Did you collect soundtrack albums when you were young?
I don't know if I did listen to them a lot. Yeah, I did.
Can you remember any that were favourites?
So I was obsessed with Jerry Goldsmith's Sleeping with the Enemy. I absolutely loved that soundtrack. And that theme, I just loved it.
Yeah,
and also The Burbs as well. I remember being really obsessed with that. And the piano and Michael Nyman and and Legends of the Fall. That was another one that I used to listen to all the time.
Can we talk through that process? Every composer that I've spoken to has said the key to what you're doing is that you are telling the story of the film. It's a part of the narrative. So how do you set about doing that? Would you start with a script or would you start with a rough cut? What is the point at which you're introduced to the story generally? Yeah, with Mum's List, because it's a really moving story. It's very, very emotional. And actually, I think the music works brilliantly for it. How would you go about starting to tell that story? Because presumably in the case of Mum's List, you know in advance what the arc of the story is. So how do you even begin to do that?
I think similar to what Isobel said, I always like to find a couple of really crucial moments in the film or pivotal scenes or sections and score them and kind of get them working. Because if you can get those moments, then you kind of know where you are and you can then work back or work forward, but you know where you're hitting.
Okay.
So I often pick, sometimes like the most emotional scene or the most, or the kind of climax of the film. And then also if the director is happy with that, then you can usually then you've kind of got your DNA, you've got your, core, and then you can work around that. So I tend to start there. But with Mum's List, I think I was on it quite early, so I read the script, and I think I'd written some themes before I saw any of the film, and that's been quite common for me to read the script and to write before seeing anything.
So how important is it to have, you said, written some themes, and speak to me as if you're talking to a small child or a Labrador puppy who does not read music. Would that be like a single riff or a complete? What would a theme consist of? I suppose it can be different. It can either be a motif, like a small little 3-note thing. It could even be a sound. That's something you associate with a character or with an emotion, or it can be a much more realized melody, or a phrase. But it would, I guess, be something that you thread through the film. And it's that familiar hook, that familiar melody that builds and builds and builds, and it can either be corresponding with a particular character or a particular arc of the story, and also some films don't have necessarily a theme. Some directors don't like those kind of melodies, but I suppose it's thematically it can be instrumentation. It's the sound of your film, I suppose. Segun, you were nodding very enthusiastically when Millie was talking about sometimes it's just a sound. Yeah. Tell me your experience of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're completely right. A theme can be anything that is recognisable, which can be repeated. And some of my favourite themes have been sounds, that you associate with a character. And sometimes you can do it in a really obvious way. Sometimes it's more subtle. But the fact that it can be anything from a great big melody to I mean, literally, I think I ran some brass through a guitar amplifier or something and threw on some more distortion, and that was a theme for a particular character. So it can be anything. That's one of the things that I love about working thematically, is that it doesn't have to just be a great big melody, much as I love great big melodies. Mm.
Can I ask all of you if you have experienced, and I'm sure you must have done, the temp track, or the director saying, I'd like you to write something that sounds like this? Amelia, have you ever had to avoid major thirds for an entire score?
Thankfully, no. But I mean, controversially, I agree with everything you're saying, and it can be really challenging. But I also sometimes find temps really helpful as a tool to understand why something works.
Okay.
And if something is working, and if everybody agrees that it's working, I quite like having that thing to go, okay, is it the tempo? Is it the instrumentation? Is it the shape? What is it? Why is this working for everybody? And then I feel like I've got something to kind of go from, rather than just having this like frightening blank space. So sometimes I do find temp can be that first barrier, that first thing that you can start discussing, because often talking about music is just really difficult.
Yeah. Whereas
when you have something there, it's easier to as a discussion to start, talking about it. And I've also had times where there's been temp music that's just been a nightmare to replace, and everybody's loved it so much, and you don't want to copy it, you don't want to try and do some shit version of it, but it's and I think you're right, actually the best thing to do in those cases is do something so different that it kind of shocks everybody, and you might end up closer to what it was, but you almost need to do something that just is so far removed from that to just to kind of break it. But
when you say it's often hard to talk about music, have most of the directors that you've worked with understood music on some basic level, or do you end up going, look, it goes like this, da 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 da? I mean, how does it work when you're talking to the director?
I suppose I'm more comfortable not talking about music with too much theory or terminology, because I'm not from that background at all. So I much prefer talking about it. Just, do you like it when it goes up? Do you like it when it goes down? Did that feel emotional? Did it, just in emotions and in kind of colors and shapes, rather than because even if they start talking to me about notes and that chord that was, I'm just like, no, that in a way it's not helpful. I much prefer talking about things just as an emotional reaction.
Is it easier or more difficult to write dramatic themes than it would be, for example, to write comedic themes, because almost every composer I've ever spoken to says the hardest thing you can do is write comedy, because you can't write comedy music. You have to write music that isn't funny. Yeah. Amelia?
I agree with what you were saying about the juxtaposition. That can be the funniest thing.
Yeah.
Is sometimes when the music and the picture interact in a really weird way, that can be really funny. But I mean, I haven't had that much experience doing comedy, and I did a film a couple of years ago, and the director really wanted me to. There were a couple of funny moments in the film, and he was like, you know, go funny, go silly, and then so I did, and then he kind of got back to me and just said, silly doesn't work. I was like, should we just do it straight? He was like, do it straight. So that was, you know, that was my small experience, and it was just actually that scoring the comedy just didn't work at all.
So that leads us into a very kind of interesting discussion of when it comes to actually recording the music. You know, everyone will have seen films of orchestras with a scene playing over and somebody conducting with headphones. What's it actually like when you're in the process of recording a score? I know some scores are recorded at home, almost entirely on, you know, your home computer systems, others in big halls. Amelia, for example, what for you would be the ideal circumstance for recording your music for a film?
Well, I mean, I've been lucky actually in the things that I've done so far, because they've all been orchestral. So I've got to do a proper recording for each one.
Yeah.
So, which has just been incredible. And I suppose the most important thing is having people around you who, I don't have much, you know, experience of recording sessions, and so having those people around you, that team of people who can make sure that, you know, you're having to get so through so many cues in such a short amount of time. And I just, you know, it's all about who can run the sessions, who can make sure that we get everything that we need. And then, you know, I can feel confident that we'll get it all done. But for me, it's all about the people around me. And
how big is that time pressure? Because, you know, sometimes you hear stories about people having weeks and months to record, but more often than not, it's you have a few days in which...
Yeah, it's always, you know, a couple of days, and just either one or two sessions usually is what I've experienced. So you're just like whipping through it, but it's just amazing. Every time I'm completely blown away by the musicians and the fact that they're sight reading and they sit down and it's perfect every single time.
And you said, you know, I didn't have that much experience of studios before. Was that not just terribly intimidating?
Yes, it was terrifying. It still is. I still feel terrified, you know, and that's why it's really important that I have, you know, an orchestrator who I trust, who I've worked with, because also I'm not, you know, I can't speak to the orchestra. I don't have that language. I don't have that, you know, I literally sit there and say, I need it to go, no, and my orchestrator will go, okay, and he'll kind of translate, you know, into, so I'm so reliant as people on that day, because I am really intimidated, and it's completely foreign territory for me, those kind of sessions.
And of course there's that wonderful thing that if you have a whole orchestra in a room and you go 1 minute over time, it's suddenly fantastically expensive.
Yeah.
Amelia, once you've recorded the score, that's not the end of the process. Everything, it's then putting it together. Amelia, would you agree with that that's just one step on it and there's a lot more to do after that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that one of the best things is obviously the recording, like you said, it's just such an amazing moment usually. And then you can get so used to your demos and to the samples, and you kind of live with them for so long, and the director and the producers all live with it. So then it is this really magical moment where you get to hear it played by real musicians with expression and nuance, and it's like this new life has just breathed into the score that's become a bit stale almost, you know, that you've kind of had around for a long time. So I really love that bit, because it's almost like everyone's put all this faith in you, and you keep saying, no, it will sound much better, I promise. And then I promise a real trumpet will just sound so much better. And then you get to actually hear the real life version. And so it can be a really exhilarating, lovely moment. And then the mix, just hearing it again, just come to life, and all of those things that you'd hoped would land have. And, you know, for me, I just love that whole process, because it's about all the faith that's been put in it.
Do you find things in the mix that you didn't know were there until you got to the mix?
Yeah, I mean, I had something on when I did Mary Shelley, and we recorded, and we had this one track that had loads of programming and synths, but then we did these strings, these kind of really beautiful harmonic, kind of shimmery strings, and they were just so beautiful. And I was with the mixer, and we just loved it. We were like, oh God, this is just so great. And then my orchestrator came in, and he was like, yeah, but you can't use this. It's nothing like the cue that you had, you know, because we hadn't put any of the programming in it, but I'd just fallen in love with this whole new thing. But I had to go back to, you know, it had to sound like it did when everybody signed off on it and when everybody, so in a way there's freedom to make things sound as good as they can sound, but you can't really make creative decisions. I mean, I'm sure you can, but you'd have to, there's then a whole chain of command. So you were really just trying to recreate the cues that you made, but obviously in their best incarnation. But yeah, I was so I was like, oh no, I can't, you know, but I prefer this. But it was too late, you know, we'd made these decisions, and you are slightly locked into what's been decided.
Can I ask all of you, because you've all achieved extraordinary success, if you were to give two pieces of advice, one to yourself and one to somebody else who was interested in working in this area, what would they be? And I won't ask you to do both of them at the same time, because I understand it's a bit of a curveball. So I'm going to start by saying, Amelia, advice to your younger self and to up-and-coming musicians.
I think for myself, I would just say to kind of be more confident and less embarrassed about what I didn't know, and to kind of felt like I almost was waiting for permission to be allowed to say, can I do this, you know? So I think that I would have just said, you know, it's okay not to know things, and you don't have to be embarrassed, and just, you know, be upfront about what you know and be upfront about what you don't know. And then I think to anyone kind of aspiring composers, I would just say that sometimes it's really good to know what your strengths are, and that it's important to be versatile and to have the ability to work on all different genres. But it's also important, I think, to have your own voice and to have your own kind of aesthetic and something that maybe makes you stand out a little bit. And whether that's writing very melodically or writing, you know, having a particular instrument or a sound, or just something that you can really know is your thing. And then it doesn't mean you're going to be right for everything, but when that one thing comes along, you're the person, you know. And I think that there's something quite powerful about knowing what your strengths are.
Have you overcome that fear that you said at the beginning? Are you now confident about what you know?
I'm confident in that, you know, I have managed that. I know I can write music for, no, clearly not. I can't even finish a sentence. No, I'm getting that, working on it.
Okay, this is from Daniel Lazenby. How closely do you work with the sound or Foley team while finalising music? Do you consider the pitch of diegetic sounds such as alarms and their harmonic relationship with music? Just curious as whether intentional or unintentional, those sounds have an interesting impact on our perception of the music tonality. So how closely do you work with the sound people? And I'll start with you, actually, isn't it?
Usually, I don't know if it's the same for you guys, but usually not very closely. It's normally quite separated. I mean, not through choice. It's just they're usually just done in quite a separate way. I mean, sometimes there are things that really cross over. I'm doing a film at the moment about swimming, so there's lots of sea and splashing. You know, so there are moments where they really intersect, and you know, you have to kind of be aware of one another. But no, I've never been really included in those sound conversations very much.
Yes, we'll go just there.
Someone that is starting out, how would you recommend you put yourself out there and be sort of openly available?
Who would like to leap in first on the very thorny issue?
I think things like this are good, though. And I think things like, kind of music, like the soundtrack festivals and all those kind of, you know, any kind of music event that specializes in film music, where you can buy a ticket. I think those things are really great because everyone goes to them, and people are usually friendly and open, and you can have access.
Are they? Is that the experience that you had, that people are friendly and open?
I think they are. I think this industry is really supportive, and actually I think people will always make time to talk to people and or listen to things, or, you know, my experience has been that people are really open to that. So I think just trying to get to events and spaces where these kinds of things are happening is really helpful.
My own experience of asking composers exactly that question is that they've all said short films are the start. You start working with film students who are making short films who are looking for a composer because it's a place to practice and make mistakes. And also, as you say, the online presence, SoundCloud or somewhere where people can go and very easily listen to a bit of your music does seem to be a key. Yeah. Let's take another question just here.
Hey, I was wondering how you guys organize your creativity, because like the idea of like kind of sitting down and being given a brief and then making kind of the score out of nothing. Like whenever I sit down with my music, I kind of get lost in all the possibilities. So how do you guys kind of, you know, get like kind of finalize it to one idea and kind of follow it through?
Yeah, how disciplined are you all?
I kind of think one of the things I love about film music or writing to picture is you are restricted and you're quite limited in a way in what you can do, because let's say you're doing a cue, it has to be like 3 minutes long and it has to do this and then it has to go there and then it has to stop for a minute and then it has to come back and the director's asked for this. So if someone just said to me, oh, you've got like 6 months to write, you know, an album or something, I would write nothing, like nothing would happen, because I wouldn't even know, you know, unlimited, you know, resources, and it can be anything, and nothing would ever happen. Whereas if I'm given these kind of quite strict boundaries of, you know, then I work quite well in that. So for me, I guess it is that discipline that I probably don't have myself. So I'm being given these really, you know, this good structure and framework and then find the creativity within that, you know. But also I need to be, you know, I like deadlines. I like having, otherwise I'll never finish anything. Yeah.
How do you go from the process of working for free to getting paid for your work? Would anyone like to pick up that particular hot potato? How hard is it to get paid for your... Because I presume that at the beginning, like we're talking about, you know, working with experimental filmmakers or student filmmakers, everyone's doing it. So how do you start getting paid? Any advice at all?
Gosh.
You see, I think in a way the silence speaks volumes, is that's the most difficult thing.
I think it's also about investing yourself, you know, and I found with the first few projects that it was either like, well, I can either take this home or I can put it into the recording budget and I can get that extra, you know, 2 string players, and I would always do that, you know. But I suppose it's like whether you can afford to do that, you know, and I was fortunate that for the, you know, that I could do that, and so I just saw it as a way of making the score sound as good as I possibly could. Yeah. So for a while that all of that just went straight into the recording budget.
I mean, if I can offer something here, I think I'm not a musician, but as a freelance journalist, and this is always the question that comes up, the answer is always, if you're doing something for yourself, do it for free. If you're doing something with other people that are doing something for free, fine. But if you're doing something with a budget, make sure that no matter how small the budget is, you get a part of it. Yeah. Because it's the thing about just, you know, demanding that you are rewarded, however. Let's take another question from the room. Yes, gentlemen.
Hi. Hi. So what would you describe your relationship with an engineer or producer on a session?
Ooh. Amelia?
Yeah, I mean, similar to Isobel, I don't have a huge knowledge of that side of recording. So I'm really... But, like, you know, I work with people that I really, really trust and who know my preferences and know my taste. And then, you know, we can talk about references. But, yeah, it's more about saying this is how I want it to feel. This is the experience I want to have. And then they know what mics to use and where to put them. And, you know, but I wouldn't understand a lot of that.
Okay. Let's take one final question very quickly there.
Hello. Okay. Sorry, I'm really bad at this. Is there any key moments in your career that you sort of like... were like, oh, this is pushing me to continue to do this. Sorry.
Very good.
But yeah.
Yeah, key moments from each one of you, the moment when you thought, this is it. Amelia, since Segun just threw to you.
Yeah, I think I probably had that when I did a film called Mary Shelley, and that for me just was the first time that I really had the opportunity to see something all the way through. And I had, you know, really strong ideas and I was really supported and I felt like it was a really, really creative experience. And once I'd done that, I kind of felt like, I think I can do this.
Well, thanks ever so much to everybody here in the studio. Thank you to everybody watching online. This was Scala Radio and Abbey Road presenting music for film as part of the Amplify Festival. I hope you've all enjoyed it as much as we have. Please join me in thanking our fabulous panel.